Let's continue learning how to read data, right? So far we looked at the basic select statement. We looked at how to filter using the where clause, then the like keyword and in keyword. We looked at how to read data with specific parameters, looking for specific things in a specific table. So we're going to continue to do that. There are a few more things you need to know about how to read data, basic things, how to read data. And most of the work we do is reading data. So I really want you to be comfortable with this, right? So the next thing we're going to look at is basically sorting. Also I added a bunch of comments. I got ChatGPT to add them, so it looks a little bit cleaner. I will continue to do that. I'm just going to write it, and then later on I'll clean it up before I actually check it in, or before I make it available for you to download. All right, so let's the next thing I want to do, I'm just going to add a line right here. Scroll down a little bit. All right, so the next thing I want to show you is how to sort data. So order by, the keyword is order by. We use that quite often. If we say select star from employees dot employees, that would by default it would sort it by an ID. Usually in this case the first column is employee number, which is typically like an employee ID, and it will sort it in ascending order. It will from the smallest number to the biggest number. And a lot of times when you're working with data, you want the most recent data, which is the biggest number, right? So every time you add rows into a table, most of the time you would have an auto incremented ID. The ID, basically every entry is going to have a new ID. One is one higher than the previous one. So normally when you look at data, you're looking at the latest data, stuff that happened today, stuff that happened yesterday. So you would want it sorted in a different order. The MySQL by default doesn't do that. It will sort it from the oldest to the newest, not from the newest to the oldest. So you can use a keyword that says order by. I'm going to do uppercase, order by, and you can tell it what to order by. So in this case, let's say we want to order by employee number. Right? So if I execute that exact same result, because the order by default is going to do ascending order, just like if you didn't specify it, right? But if you were to give it a different name, a different column, I'm just going to do order by first name. Now it's ascending. It's going to be alphabetical because first name is a string, and it's going to be ascending, starting from A going to Z. But if I want to reverse the order, if I want to say I want in a descending order, basically start from Z all the way to A, I'm going to do DESC, descending, right? That's just the keyword you have to remember, DESC. If I run the query now, all of a sudden it is sorted in a reverse order, in a descending order, basically, right? I can use the same thing with the employee number, and I just sorted by descending. Now I got the biggest number here. So if you want to see what the biggest number is, you can literally do this. You can just run the query and sort it descending of the number that you want to look at. That's not the best way to get the biggest number. You can actually use a function that's called max. We're going to look at functions coming up, but there is a better way to do that. And you want to take it a step further, you can just do limit 1, just so you get just the first row, and you can do employee number. You don't want to get everything, right? Let's just say what you want to get is the biggest employee number. There it is. So ascending, descending, that's how you use it. Let's look at another example. We want to do select star from world.country, right? And let's run that. We're running in the world database. Actually, I have a typo, I believe. Country. Oops, there you go. That should be correct. Oops. All right, so now here, let's say we want to sort it. We want to sort it by the population, right? We can just copy the name of the field. I'm lazy to type it, and we're going to say order by population. But if I want to get the smallest one, I can just leave it alone, or I can do ascending. So the default behavior is ascending order. So you can do ASC for ascending, and that will do it will sort it by popularity ascending. So there's a lot of countries with 0 population, and if I want to do the biggest, I'm going to do descending, so we'll go from the biggest to the smallest, right? So that is pretty straightforward. Usually I would use that with the date. So if we look at the employees, Let's just look at that real quick again. Because most of the time when I'm sorting, either I sort by ID just to get the latest row, or I descend by some kind of date, created date, modified date, some kind of date. In this case, let's say I want to get a list of all the employees, but I want to sort it based on the newest employees. So I'm going to say order by hire date, right? And if I want the newest on top, I'm going to do descending. So I will have the newest people basically in 2000 and going all the way down in a descending manner. Okay, so that is how you sort data, descending versus ascending. It's very useful when you want to run data, especially when you're working with big tables. I wouldn't consider this big. It's only 300,000 rows. That's not really big in the world of databases. But let's say you're working with that and you want to get the oldest data or the newest data, you can just run the query to get all of it and then go to the bottom or go to the top. But that doesn't make sense. You just want to order a descending of the field you want and just look at the top and just limit the query so you get just a certain amount of rows so it doesn't take too much time. So you can use that with numbers, you can use that with dates, you can use that with strings. Like if you want to sort the names alphabetically, all you got to do is descending first name, descending last name. You can also give it two things. So for example, I can do the descending first name, and I just duplicated it, last name. So it will sort it first by the first name, then by the last name. I've never actually have to use that, but it does work. Just something for you to look into, really. Okay. Also, I just duplicated a line. Just a side note, I use Command D to duplicate a line the easy way. Command D will just duplicate a line. If you just want to make a copy of the same query and make changes, you will use that. Another function I want you to use or to know is going to be the count function, because we're going to talk about group by, and I can't talk about group by without talking about count. So we're going to do count function, then we're going to talk about group by. Okay, so and count is a function. It's a built-in function, just like when you're working with Python, there's built-in functions that come with the software itself. So MySQL itself will give us a lot of functions. By the way, just like any other programming language, we could define our own functions. In MySQL, we could define functions, but that's a little bit advanced. But there's a lot of functions that come with MySQL itself. So count is one of the most common one that we're going to use. And I want to have a new lesson or a new lecture just on functions. So it would have made sense to put counts there, but I want to talk about group by, and group by does not really work without the count. So let's talk about counts real quick. Count is super easy. It will just give you a count of the rows for that query. So I'm going to do select star from employees. Normally that would give us all the rows, right? If you want to know how many rows there are, we can change this into no limit, right? We can do no limit, and then we can see how many rows actually gets returned. But that's not realistic. When you have millions of rows, you don't want to do that. So MySQL gives us a handy function called count star. So you're going to do count, and you're going to tell it the column name, what column to count. Usually that's not important. Usually we just do star, and that will count how many rows there are. So just select count from employees will give you just one column, one row with the total number of rows. If I duplicate this, if I do world.country and run that, then there are 239 rows in that table. If I do city, there are 4,079 rows in that table. If I do country language, and there are 884 rows in that table. So it's very simple. It's very simple function, and you can combine it with anything else. You can filter it. Let's say I want to know how many rows there are that are male. So I'm going to say where gender is M, right? That will just tell me there are 179,000. If I want to look at for female, I can just change this to F and run the query, right? Let's say in the country table, I want to know how many countries are there in Asia, right? So I don't remember what the name of the columns are continent. I'm sure it is continent, but let's just run the query first. What I normally like to do is I'll run the query and I'll pin it, so I know exactly what the structure of the table looks like. So I'll pin it. Now I can go back and forth. So here I'm going to say continent and I'm going to say Africa. Let's see how many countries there are. Okay, there are 58 countries. Another thing I can say, how many countries are there with a population of more than 10 million? All right, 10, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. There you go. So that will give us the number. So that's how you do count. Count basically gives you how many rows that query would return. Whatever the query is. The query can be really complicated. Where this, in that, in this, like this. You can have a bunch of filters. It can be a complicated query, but then you add a count, and that will basically tell you how many total rows that query would have returned. Okay, so that is the count. Then the next thing is group by. So a group by function, it is pretty straightforward also. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna say, we're gonna leave the where clause out, and we're gonna say group by. We gotta tell it the number, the column. If I do gender and run it, so it will give me two groups. So in that table there are two groups, and normally what you're going to do is you're going to do a group by some column name, but here you're going to add that column name too. So you're going to say select some column, count star, group by that column. Then what this is going to do is going to group everything by that column into one group, and will give you the count. Just better to show you actually. Why am I trying to explain it instead of showing you? So this basically told us there are this many M, this many female, right? That's just the way we grouped it. If we were to group it by first name, I can say group by first name. So for each first name, it will give me the count. There's 253 Georgies, there are 228 Bezalel, and 228 Parto, right? If you want to know how many times a specific value appears in a database, you would use a combination of count and group by. This is very, 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 very useful keyword or function that we use. I use it a lot actually. One more example: select star from world.country. Let's say how many countries are in each continent, right? So I'm going to copy the continent name. So instead of just doing select star, what we're going to do is we're going to add the column, we're going to do count, and we're going to do group by continent. This will give me the unique continents and how many countries there are, for how many rows there are in this table for each of these continents. So this is a very, very useful use case. I use it a lot. Just so many use cases. One of the most interesting use cases I use it is when I'm running a load test and I'm hammering the database, right? I'm making a bunch of API calls and I want to know how many calls are coming in per minute, right? So I will create a little bit more complicated than this, but I'll group it by the minute, and I'll count. Each API call is creating a record. Each API call is creating a record. So I will group it per minute, so I can see how many records were created per minute. So I can see how many requests my load test is sending. So I can see like am I generating enough load or not? Am I getting 300 APIs every minute or not? So group by is just extremely useful. In the exercise and the challenges, I'll give you, I'll make sure I include group by, so you're going to practice with it a little bit. All right. So that's what I got for this video. Let's go into another video and we will talk about different functions. There is a count function, which we already saw, and there is a max, min, average, like a bunch of functions that are really useful. Just want to give you the basics. There's no way for you to memorize everything, but let's just talk about really basic functions so you know they exist. When the need arises, you know to look it up. All right. So let's move to the next one.